There's a moment every year where time feels thin. The old year hasn't quite left, and the new one hasn't fully arrived. And for centuries, people believed that what you did in that moment, what you ate, who you were with, what you didn't do, could shape everything that followed. Because New Year's wasn't a celebration, it was a threshold, a crack in time where bad luck, illness, and wandering spirits could slip through if you weren't careful. Tonight we're opening the Dark Folio on New Year's traditions, the darker superstitions meant to protect, and the quieter ones meant to welcome luck in gently. From bells rung in fear to black-eyed peas eaten in hope, and the Kentucky tables where nothing was fancy, but everything mattered. Welcome back, my kindred spirits. I'm May, and this is the Dark Folio, a place where folklore lingers, superstition tells the truth sideways, and tradition reminds us that fear and hope have always shared a table. Tonight's file is about New Year's, the rituals meant to ward off misfortune, the foods meant to invite prosperity, and the family traditions that shape us even when we don't fully understand why. Let's begin our look at that threshold. In old European traditions, midnight on New Year's Eve wasn't a celebration. It was a vulnerable hour. The old year was gone, the new one hadn't fully arrived, and in that in-between space, it was believed that anything could attach itself to you. That's why bells rang at midnight, why pots were banged, why fireworks exploded into the dark, why in some places guns were fired into the air. Noise wasn't joy, it was defense. You weren't welcoming the new year. You were making sure the old one didn't follow. In parts of rural Germany, families would slam doors, bang pots, and shout into the night, literally forcing the old year out, because if misfortune lingered too long, it might think it was invited. Across Scotland, Ireland, Appalachia, and the American South, there's a rule that shows up again and again. Never clean your house on New Year's Day. No sweeping, no laundry, and no taking out the trash. Why? Because sweeping could sweep away incoming luck. Washing clothes could symbolically wash away a loved one, and taking trash out could mean throwing out prosperity before it's even had a chance to arrive. Some versions go darker. In older Irish folklore, it was said that cleaning on New Year's Day could tempt death, especially if someone in the household was already ill. In Kentucky, people didn't argue the details. They just said, don't do it. The rule was simple. If the house isn't ready by midnight, well, it stays that way. Luck, once invited in, needed time to settle. One of the most fascinating and oddly specific New Year traditions comes from Scotland. It's called first footing. The first person to cross your threshold after midnight determines your fortune for the entire year. But not just anyone will do. Traditionally, the worst possible first footer was a woman, a redhead, and someone empty-handed. Why? Because in ancient Scotland, red hair was associated with Norse invaders, harbingers of violence and loss. And arriving empty-handed symbolized scarcity. The ideal first footer? A dark-haired man bringing gifts. Coal for warmth, bread for sustenance, salt for protection. Because if luck was coming in, you wanted it well-fed and well-armed. In Kentucky river towns, there was a similar belief, though less specific. You wanted someone steady, someone kind, someone who carried good sense with them. And if the first thing you heard after midnight was laughter instead of arguing, that was a good sign. Across cultures, there's one shared belief. Never carry debt into the new year. Not just financial debt, but emotional, spiritual, and social. Arguments were settled, apologies were made, and doors were opened, sometimes literally. In parts of Latin America, people open all the doors and windows at midnight to let the old year leave. In other regions, people walk through their homes with candles or incense, cleansing each room. In the hollers of Kentucky, folks paid attention to something simpler. Don't leave your house empty at midnight. You needed something in the cupboards, something on the stove, even if it was just leftovers, because an empty house at the turn of the year meant an empty year ahead. If something unresolved stayed behind, it could grow, and by spring, it might become unmanageable. One of the strangest traditions that I've read about comes from parts of South America. At midnight, apparently people run around, sometimes with suitcases. Running around the block is believed to ensure travel. Movement confuses bad luck. Stillness invites it. Some traditions say you should wear certain colors: red for love, yellow for wealth, white for peace, because when fate is listening, people have always tried to dress for the occasion. But of all New Year's superstitions, food traditions might be the oldest, because they come directly from hunger. In Spain, there's a tradition of eating 12 grapes at midnight, one for each month. Miss one? Chew too slowly? Well, that month could bring misfortune. In parts of Eastern Europe, round foods like bread or pastries were eaten to mimic the shape of the sun, because even in winter's darkest days, people were still bargaining for the light to return. And in the American South and Appalachia, black-eyed peas, cornbread, pork, and cabbage. And now this is where folklore meets the kitchen table, because I know some families where New Year's isn't official until the food hits the table. To be honest with you, I have never loved black-eyed peas, and cabbage, I cannot stand the smell of it, and I will only eat it if it's in coleslaw. But tradition doesn't really care about your preferences, does it? Because most people that I know will say the same thing, and it's really simple. For New Year's, you eat it anyway. So when putting together this podcast, I started asking myself, what about these black-eyed peas, this cabbage, the pork, and the cornbread? Where did this come from? Where did it all originate from? Because, in central Kentucky, especially in the hollers and the old river towns, black-eyed peas weren't just considered lucky. They were survival food, the kind of thing you could grow easy. You could store them long, and you could apparently stretch them when the money was thin. Historically, they were very hardy crops, often all that remained after war or famine. People said the peas stood for coins, sure, but really they stood for resilience. Cornbread stood for gold. Pork meant progress because pigs root forward, never back. That one was a new one on me. So you ate pork to keep life moving in the right direction. And cabbage, especially cooked down or slawed, meant you wouldn't go wanting. Its leaves looked like folded bills, but it was also food that lasted. Layered leaves like folded bills. Nothing flashy, just steady, which honestly feels very Kentucky to me. And I'm very glad that being slawed means that I'm still going to be looking good because I'm not eating cooked cabbage. In my family, New Year's has always belonged to New Year's Eve. We watched the ball drop every year. And no matter what changed, that part stayed the same. I would make sure I was with my mom, and there would be beanie weenies and ABCs with meatballs. Yes, I know. Weird combinations for New Year's Eve. It wasn't fancy, just family gathered around a TV, counting down together, saying goodbye to the year before letting it go, and bringing in the new year with those that we loved the most. For us, New Year's Eve was all about witnessing, being there when the year ended. My husband's family does it differently. Their traditions belong to New Year's Day. And once you're married in, like me, well, I'm lucky because now I'm included in. New Year's Day is when they all gather. Black-eyed peas, cornbread, pork, cabbage, all of it. Big spread. And even if you don't love black-eyed peas, even if the cabbage only works for you as coleslaw, well, you try to eat it anyway. Because tradition doesn't ask for preferences, it asks for participation. They don't wash clothes, they don't rush the day. There are board games, cards, puzzles, plenty of sitting around and talking, Nothing fancy, just food, family, and the understanding that this is how you start right. And it is a good way to start the year. In Appalachian tradition, New Year's wasn't about grand resolutions. It was about making sure the house wasn't empty, the table wasn't bare, and the year began with people around you. There were goals, but not loud ones, quiet ones. Do a little better, be a little kinder, hold on to what matters, let go of what didn't. You didn't tempt fate by promising too much, you just showed up. Steady effort mattered more than bold declarations. What I love most about New Year's superstition, whether it's ringing bells to scare away the spirits or eating black-eyed peas for luck, is this. None of it's really about the future. It's about control, about standing at the edge of uncertainty and saying, I did something. I tried. Whether you're banging pots at midnight, eating symbolic foods, or simply staying awake to witness the year change, you're participating in something ancient, a collective breath held across centuries. This year's going to be a little different for us since we've moved to Tennessee. We won't get to be with everyone like we usually are. And maybe that's why these traditions feel heavier and sweeter at the same time. It made me reflect, made me look at everything for the new year and the traditions and what we normally do and what we're going to be doing this year. So it made me think about this podcast and how I could reflect on these superstitions. But it's not really about the superstition. It's about care. Caring for your people, the care for your home, the care for the year you're stepping into. So whether your new year begins at midnight with a countdown and comfort food, like ABCs and Beanie Weenies, love you, Mom, or the next day with black-eyed peas and cabbage and a house full of laughter, well, you're doing it right. Nothing fancy, just food, family, and the quiet hope that whatever comes next, you won't face it alone. So before we go, I'd love to know, are you a New Year's Eve family or a New Year's Day family? Or do you celebrate on both days and party it up? What food shows up at your table, no matter what? You can share your traditions with us on social media. You can find us over on Facebook at the Dark Folio page. And if you enjoyed tonight's folklore file, well, please follow, rate, and review the Dark Folio, because all of that helps this little ledger find more kindred spirits like us. And if you're listening over in YouTube, well, you can drop your comments and your traditions right there so I can find them easily, because I really would love to know what traditions you have. I really do love and appreciate all of you all out there that are listening to this and that have supported me in the last few months of 2025 as I put this podcast out there. I am ready to say goodbye to 2025 and rock and roll into 2026. I have lots of great topics listed that I'm ready to work on for new podcast episodes, and I hope you'll stick with me in the new year for that. So, until then, keep your candles lit, keep your cupboards full, because we all want prosperity in 2026, right? And let's get your year well started. Y'all have a good night. Happy New Year. And I'm going to see you again in 2026, baby.